let's open it up to questions. Yeah, Linda.
You've written an article recently about advantages of being a private company.
Yes.
Could you comment on that?
Oh, that article, it was distributed to everybody, I think. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, it's gotten very good feedback. Got picked up by the Wall Street Journal after it was written. That article starts with the describe the differences between what private companies face and what public companies face in the compensation governance area. And private companies have governance advantages beyond the compensation area versus public companies because they don't have the scrutiny, because the directors on the board have skin in the game typically. They've got a lot more information to make decisions with and provide oversight on. But one of the things they have in their favor is they don't have to listen, they don't have to care what the proxy advisors say. And the research is really clear. I always hear from public company directors, ISS doesn't design our plans, we do. Well, I believe that, but the research also shows that public company incentive plan design is morphing towards ISS standards. So, so the private versus public gave you a little bit of the evolution of the incentive plans and how we ended up getting this divergence between how private companies and how public companies look at and implement incentive plans. And we're gotten to the point now where there's certain things that, of course, a public company can't even think of doing, the private companies can do very easily, like mega grants, like, in a way, in-the-money options. Yeah?
Studies that show that this way comp consultants work, including you, this ratcheting up effect. Is there truth to the ratcheting up effect? What does this say in terms of public policy? Because now we've got a whole political class that's playing the income inequality issues and all these other things.
Well, there's a very general complaint about executive compensation that's just, pardon my French, too damn high, okay, like rent. And executive compensation has risen dramatically over the last 25 years. There's no question about it, especially between 1992 and about the mid-2000s. I think one of the culprits, first of all, I don't believe the ratcheting effect based on peers, studies actually show that hasn't been the case. Okay, because if that was true, you would expect companies that were in the bottom quartile with their CEO pay to have more rapid escalation than companies in the top quartile in the CEO pay, and that doesn't happen. But I think one of the things that's driving it is between 1992 and now, the percent of compensation for top executives that's fixed versus variable has gone from about 70-30 to now it's now 10-90. I mean, you've got companies that are bragging about our CEOs, 90% of their pay is at risk. Well, first of all, that's BS. It's not all at risk. We know that. But why? And by the way, as an economist, I cannot fathom that that is the economically efficient, guaranteed to at-risk amount of pay for a senior executive. But in reality, it isn't. What we call at-risk is not really entirely at-risk. We kind of know that. And why do we have that? Well, we have that because how many people, who knows why we have this huge growth in at-risk pay relative to fixed pay? 1992, 162M, the tax code penalized shareholders for paying guaranteed pay above $1 million. And so as managers' pay became more and more at risk, and has been, what happens when your compensation risk goes up? You demand a higher expected value of compensation. So I think that's part of what's driven it. The general comment about, our CEOs pay too much, Jennifer Lawrence made $50 million last year, okay? And she was complaining that she was underpaid relative to her male co-stars. Now, is Jennifer Lawrence overpaid $52 million last year? If you've ever dealt with studio executives, you know they don't throw money at 25-year-old girls just for the heck of it. They're doing it because they're getting something in return. So I ask, the S&P 500, the median pays $10 to $15 million. Is it really that much of a stretch to think that somebody who's managing a multi-billion-dollar transnational corporation, on average, is going to make a third of what a 25-year-old actress is going to make? So, no, I'm not really bothered, and the research actually backs me up on this. Is the level of CEO pay is not, is not a significant factor in shareholder value. And it's probably, I don't know if it's too high or not, only God knows. I'm just not that uncomfortable with the levels. Yes?
When you structure a value add plan, how do you differentiate between individuals in terms of contribution to value add or performance?
You know, there's a lot of art that you can apply to that, and it doesn't too much matter. I mean, on the one hand, the easiest thing you can do is we're going to say, here's your target bonuses across the company. Here's what the bonus pool is. We can distribute it pro rata. That's the simplest thing to do. But of course, that creates the perception of what we call free rider problem. Some people didn't pull their weight. Some people did outstanding. And that's true. There are other ways of dealing with people who are lagging. You can do it in their evaluations. You can get rid of them if they're really not pulling their weight. But if it really bothers you, or if it really bothers your top people, that pro rata, then you can have a distribution mechanism separate from the bonus funding pool that's based on individual performance. And there's nothing wrong with that. The power of the value sharing plan is just as strong doing it that way as doing it on a pro rata basis or any other basis.
That would be a discretionary component?
It could be discretionary. It could be objective. It could be like, we're looking at your sales growth if you're in the marketing department, or we're looking at operating improvements if you're in operations, as a basis for how we're going to divide that pool up. Now, this is where the problems with value sharing plans, there's no silver bullet. There are judgments to be made. There are pluses and minuses to all these things. That's why I say implementing those plans is every bit as tricky, in some ways more tricky than implementing a budget-based plan. But you do it once, and it lasts for several years. Yes?
You brought up stock options and restricted stock, but what about exercising them? Especially in a public company, you're restricted from exercising. That's why you have the 10b5-1
Mm-hmm.
plans. But even when you put numbers into the 10b5-1, there's always the concern that once you exercise, you must know something, you must have known something. And it gets to the point where you almost put numbers that you will never reach, and therefore, as an executive, you will never get to that point until you retire.
Yeah, my feeling is that the increasing scrutiny that public company executives have over the exercise of their options or the sale of their stock is having an effect, I think, over time of creating an incentive for your best people to leave in order to finally realize those values. And I think it's a shame. I mean, with my clients, I say, you know what, sell your shares, tell them, explain it. You got kids in college, you got, still remaining 60% of my net worth is still tied up in here. I'm only selling a portion of it. But I know it's a sale. I know it's not, it has to be explained. It has to be sold to the street. I know it's difficult. So there's no easy solution to that. I hear all the time. In fact, I'm starting to see senior executives not go to public companies just to avoid that scrutiny. Even they're going to go to private companies where your options are absolutely illiquid, and you're preferring that because at least there's an exit time horizon to going to a public company where theoretically you've got liquid equity. That's where we've gotten to. So, back here.
Yeah, first of all, you kind of touched it a little bit, and obviously for the people in this room, and you're talking about solving the agency problem between basically the owner and the shareholder.
Mm-hmm.
Public companies, it's disparate ownership base.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're talking about the CEO, but obviously the board.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a discussion about somehow getting them involved in aligning that as well with more basically stock-oriented compensation, that there would be a better government? Obviously, we talk
I mean, for boards of directors to be paid equity. If that's being done, I think, for the most part. I mean, if you're on a board of directors,
more meaningful, I guess, where the board of directors, the individuals have a lot more skin in the game.
yeah.
Being more quasi.
In private funds, what I'm seeing in private equity firms is they're requiring, if you're going to sit on the board of directors, they're looking at your liquid net worth and they're requiring you to put skin in the game there too. I think it's going to get there to public companies. I think it's already hard enough to get people who want to serve on boards of public companies because of all the scrutiny that they're under. That right now, directors are still relatively rare enough of a commodity that they can negotiate away from that. But I think it's going to get there someday. I think it's a good idea. I wouldn't want to have it imposed by law, but I think that investors are going to start looking on that favorably, and it's going to put some pressure on boards to do more and more of that. So, yes, sir.
So my question, I'm still trying to form it for the last 5 minutes.
Mhm.
was opposite of what you're talking about. Your example of you came in at 50% growth, it's more the business unit guys, you kind of add everything up together and everybody's growing at 1%.
Yes.
Okay, well, I can't go to my board with 1%. I mean, that's subjective. I just know I can't. They won't accept it. So
Yeah.
how do you, so it's always then a negotiation
Yep.
between me and these business units going, hey, come on, guys, this
Yeah.
is ridiculous, you know, we can do better. And it's painful.
Mhm.
It happens every year.
It does.
So what,
Yeah.
give me the magic bullet here for how we set these guys to, is it a value-based thing? Does that help?
It does. I mean, the value-based plan is to get rid of those negotiations at all levels in the company. I mean, when I was giving my example, I was talking about the big guy, my vice president, the head of my division, negotiating with the CEO. That's where it ends. That's where it begins. Absolutely. It's not the CEO and the board. It starts with the CEO. We're gaming the CEO. The CEO usually's got, plenty of other reasons to want to do as well as possible. But it's a persistent problem at that level. And Jack Welch, when he retired, Jack from the gut, right? He wrote this book about all of his amazing victories and how wonderful a job he did. And there's one point in the book where he expressed frustration to the very end of his career, which was exactly what you're talking about. He said, I hate budget negotiations. These are, he called them enervating exercises in minimization. And that's where it is. You're right. It's at the CEO level most of the time. The CEO has to be a little bit careful, too, with regards to the board, but you're right. It's between the CEO and the division managers. And if the bonus pool of the company is based on a value-sharing scheme, in my experience with my clients, CEOs never again have to ask, can you do better, from their division managers, because they want that pool to be as big as possible. And they're going to propose right up front the aggressive plans. And you can say, well, do you think you can reach it? Their answers will be, I don't know if we can reach it, but we might as well try. If our bonuses are simply based on how much growth we're going to get and profitability, that makes more sense. I've actually been with clients. I've had clients where they had a budget-based bonus plan, and we were proposing to put in a value-sharing plan, and we didn't want to force management into it. They were really kind of bucking it because they liked the control that the budget process gave them. And we said, you know what, we're just going to put them side by side, and whichever does better is what you'll get paid on. Whichever plan gives you the most is what you'll get paid on. And that by itself got them to revise their budgets upwards.
Well, aren't you just negotiating the share of the value that management gets? So instead of negotiating the budget, you're negotiating the share of the value.
When you set up a value sharing plan, typically it's going to be a percentage, and it's going to be the same percentage year after year. So we calibrate that what that right percentage is going to be up front when we implement the plan. It may shift over time. What I gave you is a very stylized, simplified version, but we address that in the implementation. But no, that number isn't getting to go change from year to year.
You don't go 1% if you get to this level and 2%
No.
because that's the same thing.
Yeah, because then we're gaming it, because then if we're in the higher reaches, we're going to, gun it for the short term because we're going to start over at 1% or 2% next year. We know where we're going to be next year. And if we're down here in the 1 to 2% area, we're not going to all of a sudden shoot it up. We're going to kind of step back and see how it goes next year. Yes.
Do you have any public company proxies we could look at that have value sharing plans?
HRG Group has a value sharing plan. Their measure of performance is NAV. They're a publicly held private equity firm. I don't like their proxy statement, by the way. It's very complicated. It's written. One of the beauties, I think, of a value sharing plan is really easy to communicate to your shareholders. Investors love the idea of these things. HRG's plan, I drafted the proxy statement. It was a work of art, and then their lawyers got hold of it, and you know what the rest of the story is. Yes, sir.
But basically what you're saying, though, is that the value-added plans really have a huge subjectivity in them because almost nobody's going to do a pro rata thing for the problem we said, so that the people aren't sharing their share and everything else. So
Yeah, my smaller company clients will a lot of time, half the time, they'll do it pro rata. They figure we can manage the, the slow pokes and the high achievers, differentially. The problem with, there are a lot of problems with, coming up with discretionary ways of dividing out a pie. is the biggest thing you have to overcome is if there's a pie and it is fixed at the end of the year, and we built it up to be as big as possible, but now here it is, you don't want the feeling that I'm getting less because you're getting more, or vice versa. And we have some mechanisms in the distribution for dealing with that. It's a lot easier to deal with that when you're looking at large companies because, it's too distant. Like, so-and-so got, 2x bonus, and I only got 1.5x bonus. We had a good year. We can deal with it much more effectively for large companies. So the rule is, for larger companies, we'll have a lot of other things in place on how to distribute the bonus pool that's going to be more performance-based. For smaller companies, about half the time, they'll just do it pro rata, mostly because the CEO doesn't want to have to deal with the headaches of explaining to one person versus another, why did I get more percentage than the other guy, or less percentage than the other guy, because they kind of find out, I guess, somehow. Yeah, exactly, or what my target percentage is, exactly. Don.
In support of your proposal, I'll just share that from 1988 to 1997, I had responsibility for a technology subsidiary of an automotive company.
Mm-hmm.
We implemented that. We took 10% of every dollar of profit into a pool, and the distribution mechanism was one of so many points depending upon your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add to the other question over here that the discussions and the negotiation were about whether we were in profitable businesses or not.
Mm-hmm.
So as we decided to enter new markets or new products, the discussion within management was, is this going to be profitable?
Right.
And that was a good discussion to have.
It was.
So I fully support what you proposed.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Dennis.
A few minutes ago, you made a comment about private companies and issuing in-the-money options. What were you talking about?
Well, private companies, you can kind of get away with that if they're fast growth companies, but you're going on the last valuation.
But like scheming your 409 valuation?
Something like that. It's not necessarily scheming it, but yeah, there's always, in a high growth private company, there's always a lag in what the value of the company is versus what you're issuing. Yeah,
For market value.
exactly. All right. Well, folks, this has been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and thank you very much. One more thing I want to say was, Dennis welcomed the NACD folks and the IECG folks here. I also want to welcome the CEO Trust people here.
I forgot to mention, I apologize for
They're
that.
here, and just.
But first of all, tell them what CEO Trust is, and then you can recognize it.
CEO Trust is an association of CEOs. Their mantra is authentic leadership and generosity of spirit. And they have regular events for CEOs, and they have various services also supporting CEOs or senior executive C-suite officers, including placing them on the board of directors. Is there anything else I should add? Okay, there you go.
And let me just say, Teresa, a voice over here, happens to be the brains as well as the beauty behind Mark Hodak. So if you will stand up, Miss CEO Trust, Teresa, stand up. Let's recognize you and your group. Thank you. So thanks for NACD, CEO Trust, IECG. Thank all of you people for being here. Try not to get too close to him because he's still coughing, but otherwise I think he's okay. I don't think he's tacky anymore. And I think you're serving drinks on the patio next, is that right?
Probably.
Have a good afternoon.